The moment Harriet Elaine Moseley walked through the glass doors of the Whitmore Grand Hotel, nobody looked up. That was the first thing you noticed about her, if you were paying attention, and most people weren't. She was 71 years old, wearing a pale blue cardigan that had seen better decades, a canvas tote bag slung over one shoulder with a broken strap she'd safety pinned back together twice. Her hair was silver and pinned up the way women used to do it, the kind of style that didn't ask for anyone's approval. She walked slowly, not because she was frail, but because she'd earned the right to move at her own pace. The lobby of the Whitmore Grand was the kind of place that made regular people feel like they'd wandered in by mistake. Marble floors, a chandelier so large it looked like it had been imported from somewhere European. Fresh lilies at the reception desk, always fresh, always white, always arranged by someone who understood that first impressions were everything in this business. Harriet stood at the edge of that lobby and looked around the way someone looks at a place they know by heart. Behind the front desk, a young man named Spencer Aldrich was typing something with the focused urgency of someone who wanted you to believe he was extremely busy. He had the kind of jawline that photographs well, and the kind of smile he only turned on when he decided it was worth his effort. He was 26. He had been at the Whitmore Grand for 8 months and already told people at dinner parties that he was in hospitality management. Harriet approached the desk. Spencer did not look up. She set her canvas tote on the counter. The broken strap unfolded against the marble, and she smoothed it down out of habit. "Excuse me," she said. Spencer typed one more thing, deliberately it seemed, and then looked up with an expression that was technically a smile but communicated something closer to inconvenience. "Welcome to the Whitmore Grand," he said. "Checking in?" "I'd like to speak with someone about the conference room booking for Thursday," Harriet said. "The Meridian Suite." Something shifted in Spencer's face. Not much, just enough. "The Meridian Suite," he repeated. "That's right." He glanced at her cardigan, at the canvas bag, at the safety pin. "Ma'am, the Meridian Suite is our largest private event space. It's booked for a corporate event Thursday through Saturday." He said it with the practiced patience of someone explaining something to a person who doesn't quite understand where they are. "It's not available for—" "I know it's booked," Harriet said pleasantly. "I booked it." Spencer blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Moseley. Harriet Moseley." She spelled the last name for him, though he hadn't asked. "I called Thursday to confirm the catering changes, and was told to come in to finalize the room setup details in person. Is there someone I can speak with about that?" Spencer looked at his screen. He typed something. He looked at the screen again. "I don't see ya." He stopped. Typed again. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see a booking under a corporate account, but—" "The account would be under Moseley Bridgewater Properties," Harriet said. "We've been holding events here for 9 years. That landed differently than she expected." Spencer's eyes came up from the screen, and this time they stayed on her face instead of her clothes. But the recalibration happening behind them wasn't the kind you felt good watching. "Let me get my manager," he said. And his tone had shifted into something more careful. Harriet nodded once and folded her hands on top of the counter. While she waited, 2 younger women checked in at the far end of the desk. Business casual, rolling suitcases, the particular confidence of people who travel on company accounts and have never had to wonder whether the room will be ready. Spencer's colleague greeted them warmly, offered water, made a small joke about the weather that made them both laugh. Harriet watched this and said nothing. A woman named Claudette Briers came out from the back office. She was in her mid-40s, wearing a charcoal blazer, and the expression of someone who had been told only enough to be cautious. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Moseley, I'm Claudette, Director of Events. I understand you're here about the Meridian Suite." "I am," Harriet said, shaking her hand. "I wanted to go over the floor layout before Thursday. My granddaughter's team sent updated diagrams, but I like to walk the space myself. Old habit." "Of course." Claudette smiled, and it was a real smile, though slightly puzzled. "Can I ask, did you want to head up now? Or, if it's not too much trouble—" "Not at all." Claudette glanced at Spencer, who was looking at his screen with the careful attention of someone trying to be invisible. "Spencer, can you call up and let them know we're coming through?" Spencer nodded without looking up. As they walked toward the elevator, Claudette said, "I have to apologize. I wasn't aware you were coming in personally. Usually we coordinate with your assistant." "Rhonda retired in March," Harriet said. "I'm between assistants. It's been an adventure." Claudette laughed softly. "I can imagine." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. 9 years, Claudette said. "That's a long relationship. I wasn't here for the beginning of that, but I've seen the file. Your company does the regional leadership retreat every fall." "Every fall since 2015, Harriet confirmed. "My late husband started the tradition. He believed you should take your people somewhere beautiful when you had hard decisions to make. Said it was harder to be petty when the view was good." Claudette smiled at that. "That's a philosophy worth keeping." "It is," Harriet said simply. The elevator opened on the 4th floor. "Now, here is where the story pauses for a moment, because there's something you need to understand about Harriet Elaine Mosley that the lobby did not tell you. She was born in Meridian, Mississippi, in 1952, the youngest of 6 children, raised in a house where the electricity was reliable about 3 weeks out of 4, and the water sometimes ran brown in August. Her father worked at the rail yard. Her mother cleaned houses for 3 families in a neighborhood Harriet's family was not permitted to live in. She put herself through 2 years of community college, doing bookkeeping for a dry cleaner. She met a man named David Mosley at a church social in 1976 and married him 11 months later, not out of impulse but out of the specific certainty of someone who has learned to recognize a good thing. They moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, with $1,100 between them and an idea David had been carrying around for 4 years about commercial real estate in secondary markets. The kind of markets that the big firms overlooked because they didn't understand them. David understood them, and Harriet understood the numbers behind them. They built something. Slowly at first, then steadily, then in a way that surprised even people who had been watching. By the time their youngest child was in high school, Mosley Bridgewater Properties managed 42 commercial properties across 3 states. By the time David died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in 2019, it was 117 properties. She had been running it alone since then. That canvas tote bag she carried? Inside it was a legal pad with the seating arrangements for 340 people, a printed copy of the updated catering contract, and a handwritten note from her lead architect about load capacity for the stage equipment they were bringing in. She had read every line of every document. She always did. She was not a woman who needed anyone to know who she was. But some people make that decision for you. The Meridian Suite on the 4th floor was everything you'd expect from a hotel that charged what the Whitmore Grand charged. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a sweep of downtown that went gold in the late afternoon. The kind of room that made you understand why David had chosen this place in 2015 and why Harriet had kept coming back. Standing near the window when they entered was a man named Garrett Folsom. He was the hotel's general manager, had been for 3 years, and he had the particular energy of someone who was confident in most rooms, but had learned to be careful around event planners with corporate accounts. He wore his suit like it had been fitted for someone slightly larger and had the handshake of a man who had practiced it. "Mrs. Mosley." He crossed the room. "Garrett Folsom, General Manager, it's a pleasure." "Mr. Folsom, I wasn't aware you were stopping by today, or I would have come down to meet you personally. I apologize for any confusion at the front desk." There was something in the way he said it, front desk, that made it clear he already knew something had gone sideways down there. People in his position always knew. "No confusion," Harriet said mildly. She set her canvas bag on the nearest table and pulled out the legal pad. "I wanted to walk the space. My events coordinator has the updated floor plan, but I don't love signing off on something I haven't seen in person. Do you mind if we go through the setup?" "Not at all," Garrett said immediately. "Whatever you need." They spent 40 minutes in that room. Harriet walked every corner of it. She noted where the natural light changed at different hours, asked about the acoustics near the stage, had a measured conversation with the AV technician who came up to join them about the placement of the screens. She asked questions that were specific and answered them herself when she already knew the answers, which was most of the time. Garrett Folsom watched all of this with the expression of a man doing quiet, rapid arithmetic. It was during this walkthrough, around the time Harriet was discussing the risers for the keynote stage, that Spencer Aldrich appeared in the doorway of the Meridian suite. He had come up himself. Nobody had asked him to. He stood in the doorframe with the body language of someone who had told himself this was professional and not personal, though it was both. "Mr. Folsom," he said, "I just wanted to follow up on the booking confirmation." Garrett looked at him, a brief look, the kind that closes a door. "Spencer," he said, "I'll handle this, thank you." Spencer stood there one beat too long, then nodded and left. Harriet did not look toward the door. She was measuring something with her eyes, the distance between the back row of tables and the projection screen, the way she'd done it every year. But she had noticed. She always noticed. After the walkthrough, Garrett walked her back to the elevator. Claudette had stepped out to take a call. It was just the two of them in the corridor. "Mrs. Mosley," Garrett said, and his voice had shifted into something that was trying to be casual. "I want to again apologize for anything that felt." "Mr. Folsom," Harriet said, not unkindly, "let me tell you something my husband used to say." She stopped walking and turned to face him, and there was no performance in it, no drama. She was simply a 71-year-old woman who had had this conversation, or some version of it, more times than she could count. He used to say that you learn the character of a place by how it treats people before it knows who they are. Garrett said nothing. He was listening in the way people listen when they know they've been seen. "I've been coming to this hotel for 9 years, Harriet continued. "I've brought my company here. My family has had events in your ballroom. I've recommended this property to 3 other business owners I know personally, 2 of whom now hold annual events here." She paused. "I'm going to continue doing business here, because the space is right and because Claudette has been excellent to work with. But I want you to understand that the way your young man downstairs looked at me when I walked in, the way he decided what I was before I opened my mouth, that's a choice your hotel is making. Every time, whether you know it's happening or not." Garrett Folsom absorbed this the way you absorb something that is true and uncomfortable and cannot be argued with. "You're right," he said finally. There was no qualifier after it, just that. Harriet nodded. "Thursday," she said. "I'll have my team here at 8 to begin setup. We'll be ready." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. And here is the part the lobby didn't prepare you for. That evening, Garrett Folsom reviewed Spencer Aldrich's employment file. He pulled the guest interaction logs. He read the complaint notes. 2 previous incidents. Flagged but not followed up on. The kind of paper trail that only looks inevitable in retrospect. He scheduled a meeting with HR for the following morning. Spencer Aldrich was placed on probation. Mandatory training. Reassigned from front desk to back operations while the review was ongoing. But that's not what settled the matter. What settled the matter? Quietly, without fanfare, in the way that things sometimes simply resolve themselves when the right person decides they are resolved, was a phone call Garrett made the next morning to the director of guest relations for their sister properties in Atlanta and Nashville. "I want to talk about our front-of-house standards," he said, "specifically about assumption bias in guest interaction. I want us to build it into the training program. Not as a module, as a foundation." The director listened. "What changed?" she asked. "Someone showed me something I should have seen a long time ago," Garrett said. He didn't say who. He didn't need to. On Thursday morning, the Meridian suite filled with 340 people from 18 states. The stage risers were exactly where Harriet had asked for them. The lighting had been adjusted based on her notes. A small placard near the entrance identified the event, the 9th Annual Mosley Bridgewater Properties Leadership Retreat. Harriet arrived at 7:52, 8 minutes before her team, because she had always been early to things that mattered. She wore the same pale blue cardigan. She stood at the window for a moment before anyone else arrived and looked out at the city the way her husband used to look at it, like it owed them nothing, and they didn't need it to. By 9 o'clock the room was full, and someone had put a microphone in her hand, and 340 people who had built careers and companies and lives with the help of her, and David's work were listening to her speak, and she was telling them what she always told them at these retreats, that the way you treat people before you know who they are is the only true measure of who you are. That assumptions are expensive. That arrogance is a debt that always, eventually, comes due. The room was quiet in the way rooms get quiet when something true is being said. She spoke for 22 minutes. She did not use notes. Afterward, a young woman from one of the regional offices found her near the coffee station and told her that the opening had made her cry, that she'd been having a hard season, that hearing some say plainly that your worth isn't determined by how you look when you walk into a room, that it had meant something. Harriet held her hand for a moment. Not for long, just long enough. It always means something, she said, to someone. Now I want to speak to you directly. I wasn't in that lobby. I didn't watch Spencer Aldrich decide in 4 seconds what Harriet Mosley was worth based on a safety-pinned bag strap and a cardigan. But I know that lobby. You know it too. You've stood in it, on one side of the counter or the other, or sometimes both, at different points in your life. Here is what I keep returning to. Harriet didn't need to say anything. She had the file. She had the account. She had 9 years of loyalty and a booking so large it probably made up a measurable piece of that hotel's quarterly revenue. She could have walked out of that lobby, made 2 phone calls, and never returned. She could have let the money speak for her, the way people in her position often choose to let it speak, silently and conclusively. She chose to say something instead. Not to humiliate anyone, not to perform, not to make a scene in a marble lobby full of people who wouldn't have blamed her if she had. She said it because it was true, and because she understood. The way you understand things after 71 years of being underestimated. That truth, said quietly and without apology, lands harder than any performance ever could. David Mosley used to say, arrogance is a debt that always comes due. He wasn't wrong about much. He wasn't wrong about that.